All right. So I just finished watching, well, last night, but the first season of the Jordan Peele new Twilight Zone. So I thought I'd go through each episode, give you my opinions, tell you a little bit about it. Spoilers, of course. But overall, before I get into each episode, I thought this was pretty good. As I mentioned, I don't know if I mentioned before, but I've watched a few episodes of the original Twilight Zone. I thought they were pretty good. Rod Serling, of course, is iconic. But you have Jordan Peele, who, as the host, does a pretty good job. It's a little bit different format, as the original show starts up with the and then narration by Serling, followed by the episode, and then another narration by Serling, and then the episode ends. Well, here we have like a cold open where you have something going on, showing what's going on in the episode, and then the narration opening, and then we get into the rest of the episode. But it all connects to the story. But yeah, I thought this was pretty well done. There are a couple episodes, of course, we'll get to them, that are, I don't know if you wouldn't call them agenda episodes, but they're episodes with message episodes. They have messages, which is not uncommon for Jordan Peele, because you have Get Out and Us, which have our movies with messages, So, and even Candyman, which he produced, not directed. By the way, they keep saying Jordan Peele's Candyman. Nia DaCosta directed it. He's just producing it, okay? But now let's get into the individual episodes, okay? So the first episode is The Comedian. It stars Camille Nanjiani, sorry if I mispronounced that, as Samir Wassan, a comedian who sucks. I mean, he sucks. His biggest joke that he keeps going back to throughout the episode is the Second Amendment, whatever it was. He's this guy. He sucks at stand-up, but he wants to be a stand-up comedian. He gets advice from this legendary stand-up comedian played by Tracy Morgan, who tells him to make it personal, start telling personal stories, bring his family, friends, and stuff like that into it, but there is always a price with that. So he starts bringing into it, he talks about his dog named Cat, his nephew, stuff like that, and then the people start to disappear. First, the dog. He can't find the dog, and his girlfriend, or fiance, claims they never had one. Then he talks about his nephew, and she says her sister never had any children, and he starts to realize that the classic story, I can get revenge on people. But it does change, I feel like he doesn't think about the repercussions of this, really. He's like, I can get revenge on this. It's been done in other shows before, but, Are You Afraid of the Dark? Tale of the Curious Camera. Once he realizes what the camera can do, he starts crossing off those he can get revenge on, right? And he does it here, too. But the big mistake he makes is that he is jealous because of his girlfriend's mentor. He thinks he's getting too close, so he does a joke about him. He disappears, and then everything changes because his wife is no longer a lawyer. She works at a diner, and the big trip they took, because she had the money to do it, that saved the relationship, never happened. So his life is ruined. So he tells the joke about himself, and he disappears. And that's the kind of twist of the episodes that he has to tell. It's not really a twist like the old stuff, but decent episode. I thought it was a decent start. Nothing spectacular. But the second episode is Nightmare 30,000 Feet. And if you are a fan of the Twilight Zone, you know of the original episode, Nightmare 20,000 Feet, starring William Shatner. My God, there's something on the wing. Here, it's a little bit different. We have Adam Scott playing a journalist named Justin Sanderson, right? He's going on this plane, and we do they did it in front of destination. At 10:15, my departure time has been changed to 10:15, and that's today's date. And it's flight 1015, and yeah, and he finds this like iPod or something that has a podcast on it that tells of the flight, the terrible flight of 1015 and the bad things that happened. And he eventually, he starts to try to warn people what's going on. They don't believe him. Why he doesn't have them listen to the podcast, I'll never know. But he finally gets help from another passenger, which he met earlier on in the episode. And I do want to point out that in this scene when they meet, there's a magazine rack. And on the magazine rack, there is 3 rows, each containing one magazine throughout the rows. The first one shows Samir Wassan from the first one. The second one is the book written by Sanderson. And the third one is a magazine cover talking about an 11-year-old president, which we'll come back to later in a further episode. And, there's a guy over the voiceover, that's Get Out, never mind. There's allusions to other stuff throughout these episodes, callbacks to classic episodes. But he enlists this guy, played by Chris Damathakos. He was Mo Howard in the Three Stooges movie, which I didn't realize because he looks cool here. He's got he doesn't look like him at all. He has like the 5 o'clock shadow thing going on. His hair slicked back. I thought he was Mick Davies from Supernatural, but it's not. But he's listening to this podcast, and it keeps telling, and it tells him that the last thing recorded by the pilot was "Goodnight New York" before it disappeared. And he thinks something bad is going to happen, so he enlists this guy to take over the plane. But then he realizes this guy is the one who says "Goodnight New York," and then the plane goes missing. And then as he wakes up on I forgot what it's called, Isthmus or something, he listens to the podcast again and said that remarkably the plane and everyone was found except for one person, journalist Justin Sanderson, and that's because we find out they fucking killed him. Decent twist. I like it. Third episode is really... This one, it deals with a topic that you think Jordan Peele would put. Racism, right? So it's this Sana Lathan plays Nina, who's trying to get her son to a college. It's an African-American college. And she comes across this racist cop. And she finds out that this old-style camcorder, when she pushes rewind, she can rewind back to before. But every time, so she does this, and they keep running into, like, the first instance is they're driving, and, like, I think they're going too fast, and the guy pulls them over, and it gets, he gets very angry and stuff, and then, so it rewinds, and so then they it goes over again, and she has him pull over before the cop ever does anything, but they didn't pull over right, so he freaks out again, and she's forced to rewind, because she's about to shoot the kid, and it keeps going back. I like this episode, but there's a certain point where, it gets to be too much for me. There's a point in the episode where she decides, I'm trying to make friends with this guy. And, they have a good conversation, a nice talk. And then he leaves. They go to leave. And then he notices they have a nice car. So he goes, I need to see your license and registration. And I'm like, no, that's not how it works. You just had a nice conversation with this woman. A nice, friendly conversation. You don't get to then racial profile her after having a nice conversation. She bought you fucking muffin or something, whatever it was. A coffee or something. And you're gonna... No, that's not how it works. You can't do that. And I think that's where the writing in this episode fails for me, is that they just had a nice conversation, but you still want to hammer in that he's going to be a racist cop. But don't have a nice conversation in there. Have him be dismissive. If he's a racist cop, have him be dismissive of her the entire time. Not, he gets a nice attitude and then, eventually she decides to enlist the help of her brother, they have a kind of scathed relationship, to get him there, and they end up sneaking in through like a tunnel to get to the campus. And another thing that made me roll my eyes is they walk out, they go through, and all of a sudden the cop car pulls up. Hey, where are you coming from? I'm like, no. How the hell would he know that they're there? I get the point is that there is no escape, but that makes no sense. They went through a tunnel. They weren't even around him. They never even had an encounter with him before this. There's no way that he would show up. That he would know to show up there. There is no way. That makes no sense. And then they say, oh, we got footage of you being an asshole now. You do anything, we'll use it and we'll show you how racist you are. And then I think it's implied later, because later it shows he went to college, he has a daughter, and they accidentally break the camera. And then it's implied that the cop shows up again, which, I don't know. I liked this episode, but the second half of this episode kind of went downhill for me, honestly. Next, we have, what is it? A Traveler. And for me, this was the last interesting one before we get to the message ones. It kind of just, I don't know, didn't interest me. But we have A Traveler. And this takes place in some fictional place in Alaska. And we have Greg Kinnear as the head of this, lone stand in bumfuck Alaska, where every Christmas episode, by the way, they pardon one of their prisoners. So because they don't have any, this lady brings in her brother, the actor who's been in a lot of things. I don't remember his name, and says, "Oh, you be the one to be pardoned." And he goes, "Okay, I want some fucking pie." He says it so many times in this. But when they go to pardon him, they find out that there's another person in the cell next to him, a guy just called A Traveler, played by Steven Yeun from The Walking Dead, and he wants to be pardoned. So they pardon him. Brother's passed out anyway, and he says, "Oh, I would like to be pardoned, as you will once they take over," or something like that. This was okay. I feel like it was a little bit of a slow burn, and it didn't really, he was trying to play everyone against each other, which was the point. But the aliens show up at the end, and then it cuts off. Like, oh, look, aliens are coming, you lose. But there's more story to tell here. There's just, was Greg Kinnear with the Russians? Was that the truth, or was he lying? This is before that he did lie, because he said that the brother had, weapons or something in his trunk, and it wasn't. I don't know. It's okay, but I don't know. Not one of the better ones, I guess. And then we have the Wunderkind, which stars John Cho as this campaign manager whose candidate, played by John Larroquette, loses horribly, and 5 years later he's getting drunk at a bar, and he sees this news report of an 11-year-old who wants to be president, and he decides to help him become president. This would never happen in real life. They do try to, make it work by saying legally his mom will be the president, but that doesn't happen, because yes, through a certain, points of certain situations, including the quote-unquote dying dog tactic, the 11-year-old becomes president, played by Jacob Tremblay, and he's a brat. So of course he becomes a brat. And I think this episode would have worked if we didn't keep going back to the narrative point, which was he's in the hospital, and they try to set up the twist, but they set it up too much. He's in the hospital, he's bleeding from something, he's in pain, something happened, right? And throughout the episode, we keep being told by the kid president I hate old doctors. Old doctors suck. They're old and they have stinky breath. And then when he's president, he gets rid of all old doctors, right? Wink, wink. We see where this is coming. He suspects Raph, that's his name, of treason, and he gets shot. And then they said, "Oh, the doctor's here," and it's a kid, which, and I've been trying to think about this since I've watched it. It makes no sense to me, really. Like, kids don't have PhDs. How can he? And he just goes on like this. So they fucking kill him anyway. But like, I get no old doctors. So why can't there be doctors in their late 20s, early 30s? Ones that just graduated from the school and know what they're doing? Why do they have to be kids? That doesn't work for me. And we have 6 Degrees of Freedom, a very boring episode. The episode is a Mission to Mars episode, which we've been hinting at since the first episode. By the way, the Wunderkind is the kid on the magazine in the second episode. But this crew, they go on a trip to Mars, and then the entire Earth gets nuked, and they're the only survivors. But it gets boring because I don't think they had strong enough writing to keep this going, where it's an isolation type of story, where it's just like, oh, they keep calling back to home. And then towards the end of the episode is where we get the, like the cabin fever type thing, where someone keeps saying, oh, we're being watched, man. And he claims this is just a test, and he gets sucked out. And we find out it's aliens that are watching them. And I feel like it would have been better. I know it's supposed to be a subversion because the classic episodes of the Twilight Zone have done this. Oh, we're watching you the whole time. But yeah, it just didn't work. It would have made more sense if they actually did what the guy was saying was happening. I don't know. It just didn't work for me. It was boring throughout. Next, we have Not All Men. In this episode, there's a meteor shower where our main character, woman played by Tessa Farmiga, and her male co-worker guy are watching it. And after a meteor lands, he starts acting very irrationally. And so we find out that these meteors are affecting the water and causing men to act irrationally, except for like her brother or her friend's brother, something. He's not affected. But then the twist for me deflates this episode and makes no sense. They say that the one I caught from this, they say that the meteors actually had no effect on them, and that they were just using it as a placebo to be angry. That makes no sense. A placebo is something you take and are told that it's going to do this. No one tells them, oh, the meteors are going to do this to you if you touch them. The dude, this would make sense if after the fact, like, I don't know. If there was a scientist who found it and said that this could cause you to act irrationally, only tomando, and act irrationally, and then it causes the hysteria on the men. It causes them to freak out. But no one ever says that. It just, especially since it starts with our co-worker just freaking out for no reason, and then to say, oh, they just use that to vent their anger against women, and it's like, I get the message you're trying to send, but it doesn't work in this episode. At all. Like, there's no way. No, it just doesn't make any sense. Next, we have Point of Origin. And this one is another message episode about immigration. This woman, high society type woman, played by Jennifer Goodwin, her maid is taken away because she's an illegal alien, and then she's taken away because apparently she's an illegal alien, and the whole thing is they're illegal aliens from another dimension. Yeah, pass. I remember not being in the living room. I got to the point where they say, oh, she's illegal from another dimension. You don't remember. You don't have any memory. And I'm just like, I started looking around, moving DVDs and stuff around. I kind of just diverted my attention. It didn't interest me, and it just kind of, meh. I don't even know how it ended, because I was on the toilet taking a number 2 when it ended. So, yeah. But we have, now we get to an interesting episodes, and it's the last 2 episodes, okay? We have the Blue Scorpion. This guy, played by Chris O'Dowd, and he's really good in this episode, by the way. He finds his dad has committed suicide. On the bullet, it says his dad's name, Otis. He finds a gun with a blue scorpion on it, and apparently there's a legend with this gun that it has a mysterious power and doesn't like to be in the dark. I share the sentiments, Mr. Gunn. But he finds a bullet with his name on it. And I think if they just played on his hysteria with it, his paranoia of it, and then revealed that the guy, that they have this thing about there's this guy attacking people in their cars and stuff, then revealing his name is Jeff and that's who he was supposed to shoot. But they do this thing where he's so paranoid that he's saying everyone's name is Jeff. I get that, but it doesn't make any sense to me. Oh, your name is Jeff. I mean, his wife says, I'm dating a new guy named Jeff. And I'm just like, no, that doesn't work. If they had taken away, like, everyone's name is Jeff, and you could say it's just in his head, and it's his paranoia, sure. But if they took that out, I think this would be a great episode. As it is, it's a good episode, and I do like how he fights up this guy in the car, he shoots the guy, and they're like, oh, this is the guy, last name something. He's like, his first name is Jeff. How did you know that? And then the gun gets passed on to some kids, which... But by far the best episode I've seen is the last episode of this season entitled Blurry Man. I thought this episode was fantastic. And the episode starts off like a normal episode of The Twilight Zone. You have Seth Rogen and the chick from Get Out, who was the maid. And he's a writer, and he's trying to write, a book, and he's like, oh, you know what, I'll have this actually happened at the beginning of the movie, and then it actually happens outside, and you start the narration by Jordan Peele. He's like, you know what, cut, and all of a sudden we're in the world, our world supposedly, where he's Jordan Peele, and he's the host, and there's a writer played by Zazie Beetz, and they mention, I guess it actually did happen. They say that in every episode of The Twilight Zone so far, there's been a Blurry Man showing up. Now, when we see it on this episode, he's actually blurry, but they did actually do this. There's a person with his back turned to the camera in each episode. If you pay attention, there is this. I looked on the YouTubes and found that it is actually true, but it's not a blurry person. It's just because they didn't want to cue in, so it's just some guy with his back turned to the camera, But it is pretty cool. Soon, reality starts to shift because they're like, they need to have. I do like this. So they said, oh, we need to have Jordan narrate the episode. So when she types in the opening monologue, it's about her, but she didn't type it. And he's like, oh, in the Twilight Zone, that thing. Then we have the episode. And she keeps seeing the Blurry Man around, and reality starts to blur to the point where she starts seeing this thing. It's following her around each set, which I thought was really cool. And the only thing I didn't really care for is the out of nowhere flashback towards the end, where it shows that she's watching the episode with Burgess Meredith. Time now, or whatever it is, where he wants to read a book, and the twist is he breaks his glasses, so he can't read. He has all the time in the world now to read books, but he breaks his glasses. And they then cut to this where she's in black and white, and she walks up the steps, and you see the glasses. That's pretty cool. And then they cut to in the library. The Blurry Man walks up, and they show who it is, and it's Rod Serling, albeit a CGI Rod Serling with like Princess Leia in Rogue One, that kind of thing, the Uncanny Valley. But I was like, I was blown away. I'm like, who? And they show him, and I'm like, and it hit me because she says early in the episode, she's talking to Jordan Peele, and he's like, well, he was the only one. Rod Serling, he was the only one that was in every episode, and Jordan Peele says, well, until now, not true. And I don't think it was in the 2000s episodes either, but like, they're not acknowledging that. So that's not true. He is in every episode. His back's just turned to the camera, and you can't see him. You can see him, you just don't know who he is. Brilliant. I'm like, it was her point. He's in every episode. And so he takes her by the hand. You get this, I guess it's someone doing the voice, but it's a pretty good voice impression. And I found out last night I could do a pretty good voice impression too. And they walk through, and everything it dissipates, and you get the Twilight thing going in, and they walk, and you get a narration, Twilight Zone, and I wonder if they did this because they didn't know if they were going to get a second season. So if we're not going any further, let's do a meta episode that kind of blurs the lines and explodes them, so that when you end it, it's like, okay, we've come full circle here. Of course, there's the second season, and unfortunately, they're not going to go any further than that. I will review that once I get to it. But I thought for a first season, this was pretty good. I know it's Jordan Peele, but I hope he doesn't do too many more. Like a couple more message episodes would be okay. But I don't want this to all be message because it's Jordan Peele and that's what he does. I want more sci-fi type thing, you know, and a little bit better twists. But overall, I thought the first season of the show was a decent one, and I'm looking forward to see how season 2 goes. So what are your thoughts on season 1 of The Twilight Zone? Let me know in the comments below. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you for watching. I've been Scotty, and I'll see you in the Twilight Zone.